My name is Betty June Walker Harp. My birthday is May 26, 1934. I was born in the old home in Waterford. I was born at home. Dr. Shields delivered me. Then 18 months later, my brother was born. And you can imagine living in the country and no doctors close by. And I also had an older brother who was a year older than me. So there were three of us in the old farmhouse growing up. I don't remember an awful lot early. I do remember I was quite a tomboy, being between two boys. And my mom said, "Young lady, I'm going to refine you. You're going to take piano lessons." So at 8 years old, how in the world it happened, I received a lovely piano, and I still have it to this day. And my dad took me to Mount Washington every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock to a music teacher. And I took lessons for 8 years. Now I play the organ at Elk Creek Baptist Church, which I have done for 65 years. We lived about half a mile, maybe a little more, from two-room school at Waterford. And us being the closest children, we three would walk to school and build a fire so everyone would be warm when they got to school. That was our job. We three Walker children built a fire in the wintertime. We didn't have lunches. We had to take our own lunch. Had outside bathrooms, but it was wonderful. We just thought it was wonderful. And we went to church at Waterford. We're in Sunday school, and we had sunbeams and all the grades, the classes for the low grades in the school. And we always had cookies and Kool-Aid. I'm assuming we had a car by then. My dad was a wonderful provider. We had a dairy and raised all the gardens and the chickens and hogs, and we had plenty to eat. Went to church every Sunday. Always had a big meal, Sunday dinner when we got home. Had a big house. I'm sure we had wood at first, probably, and then went to coal, and then eventually to gas. My mother was ill from the time I was about 7, and I had to be the cook and the bottle washer and all that, they say. So I'm thinking that's about the time my caregiving stepped in. I was 7 years old. I do remember this. We were having to cook our own meals because Mom wasn't able most of the time. In fact, when we'd come home from school, we didn't know whether she'd be in the hospital or be home. But I was so short that I couldn't reach the top of the stove, which was a wood stove, and then eventually a gas stove. That my dad put a chair, and I stood on the chair and fried chicken and made gravy and whatever. And I thought one funny thing he said one morning, he called me sister because my two brothers called me sis. He said, "Sister, we're going to have sausage and eggs for breakfast, and we'll have eggs and sausage for supper." I was the light of his life, I know. My dad was Well, he just loved me just so much. And we went to Mount Washington to take the piano lessons, and then just out of the blue, a lovely piano was delivered. And it was placed in the parlor. And of course it wasn't heated in the wintertime, except Christmas Eve and maybe another special day if we had to. But I went in that cold room and practiced every day. My mom said, "You've got to go in there and practice," and I did. I played my first hymn in church. I started lessons when I was 8 in May, and then in October was the time of year that you got all your new material, your Bible story books and your lessons you had to learn every week in October, and your church year would start, your new year, and if you were small, you were graduated to the next class and the next. But I played my first hymn, which was Wonderful Words of Life, when I was 8.5 years old in church. So on my 90th birthday, my niece knew all this, and we had a little program, and she had several ministers talking and several of my friends, and the director came and she made a speech, but Terry said, "Ain't Betty June played Wonderful Words of Life? And I want you all to stand, and I've got the hymn book, and I'm going to put the words up on the thing, and we're going to sing Wonderful Words of Life." So we did at my 90th birthday. Like I say, the school was in Waterford, but it wasn't a mile, I'm sure. It was probably a little over a half a mile. And it was a little village, like you see in England. And we had a post office, we had a bank. I can remember that in my early childhood. And that was in Waterford, per se. That was right in the little village. And the church set up on the hill, and we had a school. And that was something for Spencer County, to have a school. And then I can remember when it was consolidated. I was in the 8th grade, and they transported us to Taylorsville when they consolidated the schools. So I was in on the first ground of when it was really, really young, and then they closed the school down completely. They went to 6 grades, and then eventually went to all grades. We didn't have water in the house. We had a well we carried from the front yard all the way back of the house. I can barely remember us getting electricity, so I probably was 5 or 6 maybe. And that was really, really wonderful. And then I was in high school before we had a telephone. So way of communication was, they said when I was born, my dad had to get on a horse and go to the nearest telephone, which I'm sure was in Waterford somewhere, and call the doctor. So I lived through water in the house, telephones. Like I say, we had wood and coal. We didn't have heat. That's why the parlor was so cold when I had to go practice my lessons. And that had to have been in the late 30s, early 40s. I don't remember, my mother's was from it was in Spencer County, but it was over at Cox's Creek, toward Cox's Creek, but it was still in Spencer County. High Grove and Riverview. I'm not sure. They weren't affiliated. They didn't come to our church, and they had their own over there. But my dad's parents, I don't remember my grandfather on that side. I barely remember my grandmother. My dad was an only child, and my mother had a brother, but he was in almost Nelson County. I had an aunt that lived in Taylorsville, whom I'm named after. I can't think of any other close relatives. It wasn't, and you didn't have vehicle till I was 6 or 7, I'm sure, because Dad always had a nice car to go take us to church and take us to the grocery. After the Model T came, and then, the horse and buggy, and then the Model T. There were 2 rooms, and the first 4 grades were in the one room, and the next 4 was in the other room. And like I say, we took our own lunch. We really didn't want to leave Waterford. My dad said the first transportation that I can remember, and I can remember him telling it, was an old hearse. And they put stools in it, and he said, my 3 children are not going to ride to Taylorsville in a hearse. But we did for a little while, and then it wasn't long till we had buses. I guess I was a freshman, and it was exciting, really exciting. I had a lot of caregiving responsibilities at home, but I didn't miss out on too much. I had a lot of friends, and went all the way through high school together. And as you can see, I'm one of 7 left out of my class. I wasn't a cheerleader, but I had a boyfriend that played ball, so his parents saw that I got to go to all the games that weren't played at home, which was really a thrill. And on Saturday, on the weekends, I had to do my weekly cleaning and take care of things at the house, but I still had, my dad saw that I had what I needed. And when I was a sophomore in high school, my mother died. And she went to church on Sunday morning and came home and died that night. So I didn't go to school all that next week. And that was the only 5 days I missed out of 12 years. After that, I loved to cook. And I still have the cookbook I got when I forgot what year it is, and I'd invite different ones of my class to go home with me. And we had the best time. We'd cook and get flour all over everything, and then they'd stay all night with me. So that's the way I got through grieving. That's why I still love them today. And they all came. They had transportation. They all came to my mother's funeral. I stayed at home and then became engaged, and my future husband was a year behind me, so I can't remember that year other than just cooking for work hands and taking care of the house. And then we married the next year, and we lived with his parents, who lived at Elk Creek. And I drove, the day I graduated from high school, I'll have to tell you this, the day I graduated from high school, my dad took me down on Main Street in front of Veach Chevrolet and rolled off of a big truck, a white brand new Chevrolet, on the day I graduated, or it was on my birthday, which was the 26th. I did go later, but I didn't go then. The Lord's blessed me in so many ways, but I have a knack, if that's permissible to use, of knowing when things were placed properly, or it's in you. You like things. You may like something totally different. I just liked it. It was easy for me. I guess because I grew up with having to move things to clean and replace things when they were worn out, and I did a lot of cooking, So after Marty Allen graduated from high school, I enrolled at U of L in interior design. And I never shall forget, I went to the night school for adults by myself in my new car. Well, I had another new car since then, but this was later in life. And at the end of the term, I loved it. I just really enjoyed it. And our teacher, I can still drive up to her house. She had us all for Christmas, and we were to wear formal attire. So I had a green velvet long skirt and a beige satin blouse. And I took her a gift, and it was in a lovely, lovely home. And at the end of the semester, we had to write a report on whatever we wanted, a topic. So I chose the Chippendale chair. Barely when I finished high school, they started teaching typing. I wasn't too good at it, and Anna Ruth Cheek, she's still living. Hi, Anna Ruth. She was at my birthday party too. I did all the research and wrote it out in longhand, you know. But I didn't know how to type well enough or do shorthand and all this. But I got it all compiled, and I thought, she's distant related to my husband, and I thought, she was a counselor here for years. She taught, and then she was a counselor, and I admired her. I thought, I'm going to ask her to compile this thesis for me to return in to my teacher. I did know her name, but I've forgotten it. She was so sweet to me. And I handed it in, and the next day we went to class. I got a B+. It made me so happy. So happy I could hardly drive home that night. So at my birthday party, I mentioned that to her and thanked her. I love you, Ruth, Anna Ruth. Going back as far as I can remember, I'd say the flood wall was one of the first things that, which didn't benefit me in the country per se, but I think it was one of the first things that I remember was made. We were in high school. Like I say, he was a year behind me. And of course he was in agriculture because we milked cows, and his family did too. And of course he was president, they call it, of the year chapter. And they wanted to have a chapter sweetheart. So you know who was chosen by him being the president of the class. So that was an honor. Of course, I'd already gotten my high school ring, but when he got his, we changed rings. Now that was the thing to do. When we had a movie, of course he'd go in first because he was a grade ahead. He'd always manage to get back, and so he got set with me. Like I say, he was a really good basketball player. Really, really good. And I think all of his friends, well, Tommy Akins is still living. I saw him not long ago, and he did recognize me. And Bobby's parents would always see that I got to go to the games. I couldn't ride on the bus with them, but they'd bring me back and meet the bus, and then he'd take me home. After that, after my mother had been gone a couple of years, my dad started dating. So when Bobby and I started dating, he wouldn't leave me at the big farmhouse until my dad came in from Dayton. And when Dad would walk by the car, he'd peck on the window. We'd probably be asleep, and I could go in. But Bobby wouldn't leave me by myself in that big farmhouse. I do remember that. We'd go to all the school events, of course, pretty much. There wasn't a lot. But the basketball team, there wasn't any football or any bands or anything then. I guess just hung out with the sports is all I remember. It was rare for us to go to Louisville very often, but nobody did, so you were fine. You know, that never bothered me. And the old sweet shop, that was the place. Well, I didn't really at the time, you know, but like me being kind of in designing, I knew it was, but it was run down, hadn't been lived in. We didn't do, I don't think, remodeling per se, but we did make it livable. We had to, you know, there was no bathroom, there were no running water when we first lived there. And of course the rooms were so big, the heating was really a problem. Well, not a problem, but it took a lot of money to keep it warm, so you lived in 2 rooms, but they were huge. And of course we put in the bathroom in a big closet. Now in the summertime you wouldn't have any problem. And we were forever getting it furnished, of course. But it didn't matter because you had to work to pay for it. So you just made it livable, I'd say. 1853, I think. Story is the brick were milled on the farm it was on, you know. And we had 160 acres. But we had to think about buying cows and making the barn easier than what we gradually went up and put up silos and all that. Just Marty Allen. Well, let's see, after he was born in 54, we went to live with my dad. And Bobby drove back and forth to milk every morning because we didn't have any insurance. We were 19 and 20 years old. We didn't have any health insurance. And before he was born, my dad raised hogs, like 500, and take them to market in the fall. And we were still up at the house with his mom and dad at the time. And I was expecting Marty Allen. And I said, bring me 2 runt hogs before you ship them all, and I'll raise them, and maybe I'll make enough money to pay our hospital bill. So it came about, and Bobby's dad made me a little pen for my pigs, and Dad took the 500 to market, and I had gone to the hospital, and you won't believe this. He sold the hogs in Louisville. I was at a hospital in Louisville. He came by the hospital, and he had taken my 2 little runt pigs to market with the others. And it was almost verbatim to the dollar. It paid my hospital bill. Gave me the check. But then when we found out he was going to have several surgeries, and we didn't have any health insurance, my dad said, why don't you just come down and live where you were born in the big house? There's plenty of room if Bobby will consent to go from Waterford to Elk Creek every day and work. So that's what we did for Marianne was 9 years old. And he had to have several surgeries, so that got us through that. But we took out insurance and just almost immediately. And you had a waiting period, but they waived that, I think. And we came out fine. They said it would cost $10,000 to get all the surgery, and back then that was more than we could fathom, realized. But we did fine. We were young, and you don't realize, and it was a good thing. When you're young, you know, just all you could do was work every day and pray for the best. Most of my classmates, some of them married before we ever graduated. It was a fairy tale romance. We lived with my dad till Marianne was 9. We'd gotten most of the surgeries over with, and we'd started to speech school. And I'd drive back and forth to Children's Hospital. So my dad remarried. That was after 20 years after Mom died. And he built his new wife a new house right here in Taylorsville. And he said, "Is there any way you all can build a house?" And I said, "Well, I don't know why. We were working so hard. But I loved it. You know, I stripped tobacco and raked hay. I didn't milk cows. But Marianne went to the barn every morning at 3:30 and fed. And Bobby worked hard. And we bought a tobacco market in Shelbyville, and he worked in the office in the wintertime, and Marianne would go up every time he had a chance from school to work in the office, and I'd go strip tobacco for all the neighbors. I had an old van, and I got 2 or 3 together, and we just had a ball, went and stripped tobacco all day. So we investigated around, and Bobby's dad had bought 3/4 of an acre across the road, way from our farm now. Across from the road there was a doctor's office. Years ago, paid $300 for this piece of land. With it, maybe we would build someday. And sure enough, we did. We got into it, and we could get the money. And so when Marianne was 9, we had a house. Dad built a house in Taylorsville for his new bride, and the same builder whom I knew, his mom had kind of hovered me after my mom died. And he was a contractor in Louisville, so he built both houses, one in the fall and ours in the spring. So in 1963, we moved into our new home. My neighbor said, "June Jeffries, you said this." She said, "You all never lived to pay for it." Right next door. We were neighbors right next door. I don't know how many years we had, but we paid for it in 18 years. But anyway, we had a new home. The living room wasn't furnished for 2 years, but it didn't matter. We worked daylight till dark and paid for it. Paid for Marty all his services, and Bobby was a workaholic. He wanted everybody with him to work, and you worked. But I loved it. I loved it. I got to furnish my home, and we took vacation two weeks every year. We'd choose east, west, north, or south, and we'd cover that, and next year we go the other direction. So we took Marianne to every state in America by the time he graduated from high school. So then they went to the warehouse, and that was, Marianne went and worked in the office up there for his dad in the wintertime. Like I say, we worked really, really hard. Evidently it hadn't hurt me. So Bobby played golf a lot, and he was wonderful in any kind of sports. Before the warehouse opened that fall, he took his had an office manager and a couple of guys, and they went on a golfing circuit down south. He'd already had 2 open heart surgeries, but he still played golf. He loved it. So they were in Gatlinburg, just out of Gatlinburg, and he died on the golf course 35 years ago, November, 35 years. So he was 55. But anyway, we made it. We did fine. They flew him home. We went down. They flew he and I home in a medical jet. He lived 47 days. That was hard, really, really hard. No, he was brain dead, knowing he wasn't going to make it. So, and then after that, we sold the cows and the farm and just kind of got ourselves organized. And the next year, my best friend and her husband asked me if I wanted to go to England. They had the feed store here for years. Kerr Mason and his wife, they're both gone. Southern States. And I said, well, yeah. Said, well, Kerr was in the Army in Second World War, and he was in France, and they sent him over to England to for rest, all his crew, and he met this man, and they'd been friends ever since. And when he said, Kerr's wife said, Harold has just lost his wife, and we're going to go to England to visit him. You want to go? I said, if I get everything organized from the farm sale and everything, I said, I think I will. So we went for 6 weeks. We were going earlier, and I had to play a wedding for a best friend of mine, her daughter, and we left the next day, went to England, and stayed 6 weeks. He had just lost his wife, and he had a big house. He was a professor at a college, and you can imagine me a professor and me an old country girl. But that wasn't the reason. But I'm thinking my best friend and her husband had that in the back of their mind, you know. We had a wonderful time, went over the continent, went to all the countries on the continent. And when I left to come home, I could tell something was brewing, but I never let on. So that Christmas, they invited him to come to America and spend Christmas. He'd never seen an American Christmas. So, needless to say, you know the rest of the story. I went, it was a strange setup, but we weren't sure, and it was just fun. And we'd go, when we were in England, I'd go stay 3 months, and then I'd come home, and then 2 or 3 months he'd come over here. Now that's the way we did it 15 years. I probably crossed the ocean. I went 1 year twice, but I'd go once a year, and then he'd come over here the other half. It wasn't hard. It really wasn't. I think, and when you're young, you're busy working and trying to accumulate, and then after all that happened, and he was retired. I wasn't retired yet, or I didn't know what. You don't retire from farming. You don't have a payment after nothing. You just retire. He'd already retired, and he wasn't sure either. He really wasn't. And I thought, I'm going to travel and just see what retirement and what having fun and not having to worry and all this would transpire. So he came that first Christmas and stayed at Winnie's. He didn't stay at my house. He was a perfect gentleman. He was a professor on how to set up a pub, how to run a pub. He was a wonderful chef. Totally different, totally opposite. It was just opposite. Well, after the first Christmas, he said, would you want to come to England and see how we celebrate? He couldn't believe all the gifts you had and all the lights, and their theory is education. That's their priority, is their education. They don't have all this that we have, like Christmas. I loved the quaintness of England. I loved the countrysides of England. It was royal, and I just loved it. It was a long time before we ever committed that we might be falling in love. I know the first Christmas I went, he had an alumni Christmas party at the college, and of course they have 4 or 5 glasses around and all this silver. I wasn't a dummy, but I knew some. And I had nice clothes because I went to church every Sunday. Bobby saw that I had nice clothes and always had a good car to drive. And I was so frightened that I told him. He had on tuxedo and I had nice things, but all this silver on the table and candles, and I said, honey, I'm just so afraid I'm going to embarrass you. He said, you going to embarrass me? I said, I'm just an old country girl, and I know how to do some of this. He said, don't worry about it. All I want you to do is be yourself. They loved it. They loved to hear you talk. He had 3 children. They just welcomed me like crazy because he was really had a hard time with losing his wife. I did too, but it seemed like harder for a man. I think it is harder for a man. Yeah. So he entertained me royally, went to Australia and stayed for 6 weeks, went all over. He proposed 3 or 4 times, and I said, Harold, I've got all the diamond rings I want. I'd rather us just enjoy doing, if we want to travel, if we want to stay at your house or at my house. I don't want any more. I don't have to have that. And I thought, Bobby gave me earrings and a pendant one year for Christmas. Dumb me, I called Mariana. I said, Mariana, send those diamond earrings and that pendant to me. We've decided I would furnish the diamonds and he would have me a ring made. Sent it in an envelope to England now. Got there just safe as could be. So we went down to London and chose, he knew a nice jewelry company. And I designed my own ring. And they had to, of course, have it appraised and valued, and I wear a beautiful diamond ring. I didn't want to take anything away from Bobby for nothing in the world. But it was, well, let's see, it was a year and a half. My best friend won a cruise to the Caribbean, and he didn't want to go. He was a workaholic too. Kerr Mason lived here with Southern States. He owned Southern States. But he had won a cruise, and his wife, he worked worse than Bobby, to tell you the truth. And he said, Betty June, you want to go on that cruise with Winnie? I said, well, if I get everything rounded up, well, it won't cost you nothing. It's you going in my place. We had the best time, but I did get melancholy really bad. But that's before Harold ever came in the picture. And we had the best time on that cruise, just she and I. Because she was with me and I was with her all the time. We canned together. They'd come out home and my basement opens up on the ground level and we'd back to pick up full of tomatoes or corn and fix it and can and work like crazy. And if she had a bunch of windows, I'd help her do windows and she'd come out and help me do windows. Now I got 2 and they clean them. I was a kind of fanatic on clean windows. I was fanatic on clean house, to tell you the truth. And then the next year, it was in June because this friend of mine asked me to play her wedding and I thought, I can't go in. So we got our reservations. I'd flown, but not out of the United States. And then the year I went to Australia, I had to have a visa because I had to go out and come back into England before I could come home. I learned a lot, but I loved it. I just loved it. I've seen so much. Harold asked me to come to spend Christmas with he and his family, and he had little grandchildren, you know, and I'm not ever have any. And I went to my hairdresser, and I'd gone to her for years. I said, Sarita, Harold's invited me to come to England. I can't go to England. I said, I'm not married to him. She said, oh, Betty June, it's the 90s. I thought, well, I'm going to talk it over with the Lord and just see if there's a possibility. So he approved it. I really, truly did ask his guidance, and after it's all said and done, I'm not ashamed of it. I loved it. He's passed away. He was 8 years older than me. He's been gone about 15 years, but he fell in love in Sydney, Australia. I've still got the letter. I don't think I threw it away. It said we were in Sydney staying 3 or 4 days, and I was standing on the bridge that went over, and he was taking a picture. So after I got home, he wrote a letter, and he said, that's when he fell in love with me, he said. Well, like I say, I guess when I was 7 years old, standing on the chair cooking supper for my dad and 2 brothers, I wasn't aware of that's what it was called. After Bobby died, and we got things kind of squared away before I went to England, before I started going to England, I worked at the daycare, the new one out. It was new then, they were building it out at Elk Creek. And I was in the nursery with six-week-olds. I worked there 10 years. When you get 80, government doesn't want you working with babies. They're afraid you'll drop them, I guess. I don't know. So then I started, I don't know, I wanted something. I had to have something because I'd scrubbed and cleaned, and I thought, I can do this and do something else too. I don't know, I just started questioning around at church about, if you need anybody to sit with older people, or if you need anybody for a day or two or whatever, and that's the way it started. Becky worked at where you get your license. Her mother was bedfast, and I was up there forever, and she'd have to go home from her office and take her to the bathroom. And then I had a neighbor that his wife was going into dementia real early, and he had a real prominent job, so I stayed with her almost 6 years, right there by me nearly. I did it for money. If you didn't, you're not telling the truth. I wasn't going to work for nothing. I did a lot of it, but I thought, you could make a little extra money this way. So after 2 or 3 of them had died, I thought, well, I'll see if there's a company that would hire me. Of course, I'd have to pay them. So I had a friend at church whose sister worked at home instead. And she said, well, I don't know whether they'll hire or not. So she's so old, I just doubt it. And I stopped by their office right there at Hikes Point, and I could have gone to work that afternoon. So I had 3 days of orientation, and the last day they asked same thing. Why was I there? I said, well, I've lost my husband, and I got a lot of love to give, and I want you to find me somebody. And it was a man, and he pointed his finger at me, and he said, I've got the very person in mind for you. And she lived right in J-Town. And I went to work on Monday. I had an old white Chevrolet I loved. That was the very first car my dad gave me when I was 16, was white Chevrolet. Well, I had a town car or something when Bobby died, and I got rid of it and got this. I loved that car. It didn't have a dent on it, but it didn't have 100,000 on it. But anyway, Marianne said, Mom, you're not driving to J-Town unless you get a new car. I said, Marianne, this old thing it was clean. It didn't use much gas, and I'll be fine. No, you got to get a new car. So he and I went shopping for a good used car. Well, they were higher than or as high as the new ones were. So I have a brother's just turned 90, old bachelor, and I thought, I'm going to see if he'll go with me and see if I'm making the right choice, picking out something. I said, will you go with me to help pick out this car? He said, yeah, I reckon. I'll be up there tomorrow and you get in from work and we'll go look at it and see. It's in Shelbyville. Unbeknownst to us, the next morning, bright and early, he went shopping for a new car for me. So he said, I'll be up there when you get home from work. He pulled in behind me in my driving. I said, well, come on. We got to 2 o'clock to get over there. So he had gone out shopping, had to go to Oxmoor. I pulled up. Marianne went with me. Said, we got to take him. Said, you probably won't be able to drive it home. Oh, what in the world's he done? And we pulled up right in front of Toyota. My car was white and shiny, and went in, and Charles was already there, and he said, it's a second car in that row there. Went out there and it had $25,000 on it. I said, I'm not going to pay that for a car. I haven't got that kind of cash, and I've never had a car payment. I ain't going to have one now. Well, get in it and drive around. Well, we did. Drove like a dream. So come on in, we'll get it fixed for you. And I said, well, I'm not going to buy it. No, I'm just not going to buy it. Well, come on back here and let's see. The guy in the finance, I'd never done all this, see. He thought we were husband and wife, and he said, no, it's my sister. He reached in his hip pocket and got a check and laid it out for $25,000. Said, fill it up with gas, she's got to go home. So that's how I started going to home instead. Before Christmas last year, one of the girls in the office, I didn't type, I didn't all this stuff. She said, I'll help you. I was working close there, so I stopped by in the afternoon. Well, I worked till 5 o'clock. Everybody was closing up and they were leaving me there by myself. But the girl that told me she would, she came and helped me. And I didn't get finished, so I had to go back the next night, do the same thing. And she said, you're going to finish tonight before you leave here. And I think I passed with 88, made 88. I was so tickled. So I got my diploma to take care of an Alzheimer's patient. The receptionist, she said, do you mind if we put your name in for Caregiver of the Year for national honors? And I said, don't matter to me. And they wrote an article and sent it in. So 2 days before Christmas, they called me in the office, said, you got to come in. And when I walked in, they tried to camouflage it a little, and it was 2 men came out, and they were big shot directors one was from Cincinnati, I don't know where the other one's from. And they said, come on, we got to go in here. So he said, you take this shoulder and you take this shoulder. So I went in with 2 men, and a lot of my family was there and several from my church, and they had a surprise party. I had won national honors, 250 entries, and I'd won it. I thought I'd faint. Try to be yourself, because if you don't love yourself, and I thought that was kind of selfish when I first got adjusted to the question, you can't love anybody else if you don't love yourself. You have to have that in your heart. And how are you going to have it in your heart if you don't love that person that the heart's in?